Get started. Okay, we are recording this session. My name is Jules Van Sant. I want to welcome all of you today to our web meeting with a couple of our friends from New Direction Partners. We have Peter Schaefer and we have Russell as well. And then we have Carrie Sherburne with What They Think and New Direction Partners, who's going to be helping us moderate as well. Today's subject matter is succession planning. Again, we do have a chat function that feel free to ask questions during the session. We will be able to promote those questions out forward. They will be anonymous, so don't be shy. The slides will be going on as well. Carrie is taking care of those today. You will get access to that, again, as well as a full recording of today's session. With that, I'd like to introduce again, who's starting? Peter, are you starting?
No, Jim is starting today.
Starting, all right. Jim, take it away.
Thanks, Jules, and we want to thank the PIA affiliates who have participated in this for giving us the opportunity to present today. We hope you'll find the material useful, and as Jules said, if you have questions during the program, please send them in to her. We'll do our best to address them. But if we run out of time, Peter and I are always available afterwards for follow-up phone calls. So with that, you have in front of you the agenda for today. We're going to talk about succession planning. At first, we're going to define succession planning. We're going to talk about the differences between management succession planning and estate succession planning. And then we're going to lay out a 5-point plan or 5 components that make up a good succession plan, and then we'll wrap up from there. We've all heard the phrase before that 2 things are inevitable in life: death and taxes, and you better plan for both of them. And we agree with that. There are a lot of things that you can do as you work through the planning of your business and whether you want to hold on to that. But these are just a list of a number of things you can do with your business before you retire or pass away. You can sell it. You can merge with someone else. You can give it away to a charity. And while that may seem a little bit odd, that's fairly common in Germany. Peter and I have worked with a number of charities or printing companies in Germany that are owned by charities or foundations. You can dissolve the company and liquidate it. You can gift it to family members or sell it to family members. You can sell it to a group of key employees. You can sell it to all the employees through an ESOP or any combination of the above. But whatever you decide to do with your business, all of those are going to require planning. If you go to Webster's and look up the definition of succession, you're going to find about 8 or 9 different definitions. We're not going to read through all of them. The last one on this slide, the descent or transmission of a throne. I think there are some family businesses where the next generation may feel that they're entitled to take on that role. But it doesn't always work that way. Next slide, Carrie. These are some other definitions from Webster's of succession. But the one we're going to use is on the next slide. And really, the most common perception or meaning of succession as it relates to this seminar is the end of one era and the beginning of another. And whether that's planning in your business as you want to transition to a different stage in your life and turn the business over to others to run it, or whether you're planning for estate succession planning, it really is the ending of one era and the beginning of another. And planning for those events can be time-consuming, it can be maddening, it can be emotional, it can be stressful, it can be fun at times, but it can be very rewarding when it's done right. And hopefully, as we work through this today, we'll lay some groundwork for you to do that in a proper manner. First off, we're going to spend the next 3 or 4 slides talking about management succession planning. That is building a team where you can hand over the business to another group of people while you continue to own it and while you continue to be involved in the key decisions. And we think the first step in doing that, beginning that process, is evaluating whether or not you have the needed talent or skill set in the business today. Are they ready for the job that you have in mind for them? If they're not ready, can they be ready with coaching and training? And if they're not ready or not coachable, do I need to look outside the organization to find the talent that I'm looking for? We believe strongly that building a management team starts with the hiring process, and that you need to recruit, retain, and develop the most talented and superior employees. And you can't be afraid to hire people that are smarter than yourself. I'm a big believer in testing when you're recruiting people, and a big user of the Wonderlic and Caliper test, although there are others that you can use. But I think it's important that you use the testing, and I can relate a number of experiences using the Caliper test where I've interviewed people I think are a great candidate for the position I want to fill. We let them take the Caliper test, and the results come back and they're not recommended for the position. And I can also relate personal experiences where I've ignored those tests, hired the person anyway, and then 6 months later, the person's not performing. You pull out the Caliper test and you were forewarned that they had no empathy for the people they worked with, or they didn't pay attention to detail. And so anyway, I would just strongly encourage you to use testing when you're recruiting and hiring people for key management positions. I also think it's important, oops, go back, we're not done here. To share career paths across the organization. I know that in a lot of companies, we feel like when we hire a production person, that they're going to be in production all their lives, or when we hire somebody in the office, that's all they're cut out for. But I know I was guilty of that when I started my company, but as the business grew, we found a lot of opportunity to promote from within. And we had a receptionist that eventually became the controller in our company. We had, of course, CSRs that turned out to be great salespeople. We promoted from within in a bindery person that worked in the web department and did a lot of web development for us. So I would always encourage you to be open-minded about the people you have in the organization, scout out the talent that they have, and look for opportunities to promote from within. And finally, I want to share the other one is don't be slow or afraid to fire when needed. Nobody likes to fire people. It's never fun. But again, I can share a personal experience where I had to let go of a pre-press manager. And that afternoon, someone from the office came in and thanked me. And I said, "What are you thanking me for?" She said, "Well, I won the pool. Everybody in the company knew you were going to let that person go. It was just a matter of when." And the point in that, I guess, for everyone's takeaway is that your people know who's working out. Your people know who are committed to the organization and who's not. And you need to listen to what other trusted advisors are saying, but don't be afraid to fire when you've got somebody that's not in the right position. Also, in management succession planning, you need to know who has the skills to grow and lead an organization and who wants to grow and lead an organization. Peter and I worked on a situation that relates to the who wants to grow a few years back when we were doing a merger. And we had two companies that on paper made perfect sense to merge together. One was a little larger, one was a little bit stronger balance sheet. And we just assumed that that person would be the president of the combined organization going forward. And after about 6 months of delays and stalls and nothing happening, we asked this gentleman, what's preventing us from getting this done? And finally he said, "I don't want to lead anymore. I've run my company for 25 years. I'm tired of having everything on my shoulders. I'm tired of making all the decisions. I'm looking forward to having a partner to help with these decisions, or somebody else made the decisions. And we really quickly flip-flopped and put the other owner in charge and reversed their roles, got the deal done a couple months later. But the point is, you can't just assume that everybody wants to grow and wants to lead. Some people don't want that responsibility. Another thing that we think is important to management succession planning is you have to share information throughout the company. Share financials, share sales reports. Be sure that people know what's going on in the company. And we always shared in my business the financial statements with all the employees. And when I refer this next point to the merit badges, I remember one day walking out, got involved in a conversation with someone in our shipping department about, I don't know, football or whatever was going on. And after a couple minutes, he said, Jim, I really got to go. It's the last day of the month, and I need to ship $50,000 today to get to our break-even point. And I thought, when I walked away, I was very pleased that the guy in our shipping department knew what our sales were for the month and knew where he needed to be to get the company to break-even point. So the more information you share, the more everybody in the company knows what's going on, and the more you're laying the groundwork to develop the management team from within. Not a big Ross Perot fan, but we'll complete this slide with this statement. There's no greater honor than to live in the shadow of your son. And whether it's your son or an employee or your daughter or someone that's not a relative that you developed from within, there's a lot of reward in developing employees and developing a team that can take over your business and run it successfully for you. As we move into estate succession planning, there's a lot of things that will tie back and forth between estate succession planning and management succession planning, but the rest of this is going to have to do specifically with estate succession planning. And there's a lot of key points. Number one, when you're dealing with estate succession planning, getting the timing right, getting the planning done, give the next group that's going to follow you the best chance to succeed. But as the owner of the company, it's your job and you have to take responsibility to make it happen. We think there are 5 components to a good succession planning process. Number 1 is defining what the objectives are. Number 2 is talking about the timing. Number 3 is confirming the financial resources are in place to make it happen. Number 4, talking about the people and making sure you have the right people involved in the process. And then number 5 is an assessment of the whole company, what do a SWOT analysis of the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, and then develop the plan from there. Next slide. The first component of that plan is the objective. And this is sometimes the easiest to talk about, but it's the hardest to agree upon. And you have to go through this process, and the owner has to be very open-minded about what they really want to achieve and what their objectives are. We've seen many cases where the owners say one thing, but when you get down to the nitty-gritty, they want to achieve something else. Maybe they say they want to sell the company, or I really want to pass it on to my kids, but they don't, you realize that the kids aren't capable of managing it. So you have to be open about the objectives. But the other
Jim, if I could just point out one thing too, one thing we have found time and time again is that if you don't go through this objective process and go through it several times, your mind is often going to change, as you said. And we call it the emotional walk on the beach, where you really have to do it and take the time to say, okay, this is what I'm envisioning, because when it actually comes, we have seen many clients just where they're like deer caught in the headlights, where they really didn't think it was going to happen. So it's an important process. Sorry to interrupt.
I really don't. Thank you, Peter. That's a great point. The next thing about the objectives is it's your life and you can do whatever you want. There are no right or wrong when you're defining your objectives. You don't have to necessarily do what other people expect of you. We've seen scenarios where some people will say, it's my business, I built it up, I'm going to take care of myself, and I'm not worried about my children or my employees. I want to do whatever I can to maximize my own return. And if that's how they feel and that's their personality, that's the right objective. We've worked with other people who say, I've run this business for years, I've done very well, I've got all that I need, I want to take care of my children, or I want to take care of my key employees. And as we work through this process, I want to do the things that'll take care of that group of people. Whatever your personal goals are, that's what the right objectives are. There are no right or wrong answers when you're working through the objectives. So normally at this point, if we were all in the same room, we'd make a list of common objectives, but some of the more common ones we've already talked about. I want to maximize my return. I want to take care of my employees. I'm tired of running the business. I want to sell the business, but I want to keep the real estate and have a tenant in my real estate. We hear that frequently. I want to turn it over to my management team. So you have to list what your objectives are, include your spouse, include some key people, but it's really important that you come up with an objective, a set of objectives that you're comfortable with. The second component of the 5 components is the timing. And we really think it's important that you get the ages down and you spell out what you want to do and at what ages you want to achieve it. Doesn't mean you can't change as you go through the process, but an example might be, I'm 50 years old now. I want to control what happens in the business until I'm 55. By the time I'm 60, I want to transition the company to where other people are running it and have a plan in place. At 65, I want to be able to spend my winters in Florida and not really worry about the business. And when I do that, I can get by on 50% of my current compensation. This is just one example. Yours may be totally different than that, but you really need to spell it out step by step of what your objectives are and at what age or what date you're going to try to achieve those objectives.
Hey, Jim, can I ask a quick question?
You may.
So how early is not too early to start planning?
Well, next slide, perfect timing.
That's good, Jules.
There's really no age that's too young to start planning. There's always surprises and things that happen in life that catch us off guard. But generally speaking, we think, when somebody's in their late 30s or 40s, they're going to put something in their will. They're going to have buyout clauses if they have partners in their business. Maybe it's not too detailed at 40, but at 50 years old, you need to start getting more specific. State what you want to happen. This is my long-term plan. If I survive long-term, but if something happened to me, here's what should happen to the business. At 60 years old, you're going to get more specific. Who's going to be in control? Who's going to be running day-to-day operations? What my salary requirements are going to be. Maybe you've started a gift stock to children or other people to begin with the estate planning purposes. And at 70, you should have a complete plan in place. Again, those ages may vary depending on different people's personalities and desire to plan, but those are some generalities about how you might want to work that plan. Next. Finally, get the timing for when major decisions will occur on a calendar. Review the calendar a couple times a year, update the plan as necessary, and make sure you have enough reminders in place that you don't let it lapse. And with that, we're going to turn it over, I think, to Peter, and he's going to cover the financials and the rest of the presentation.
Can I ask a question in here before we move to Peter? And Jim, early on you talked about the importance of making the right hires, and you referenced the caliper test. Mm-hmm. How do you access that, and are there other tests that you've used with success?
I'm sure if you look up Caliper online, you'd be able to find it. I don't have right at my fingertips the contact information, but
Through the CIA affiliate, you can get that information.
okay.
Yeah,
So,
and that's a good one. Myers-Briggs is a good one too.
yeah.
Which one? Oh, Myers-Briggs, right.
Yeah. And so I've used Caliper for 20 years. I've come to rely on it. I know it's a good one, but I know there are others out there as well.
Okay, thank you.
That's great. And can I go back to one other thing? You talked back earlier about sharing financials, I guess, getting buy-in from the employee base, assuming that you're having them sign a non-disclosure agreement. I mean, do you do that, or does that create a little bit of, I mean, how do you handle that?
You know, you could. I think that really depends on the company culture. In my company, we did that from day one. As we grew, we shared information quarterly with people. So I did not have non-disclosure information from them. I guess if word got out that we were profitable or not profitable, I wasn't losing sleep over it. I know other people are more sensitive about that, but in our case, we shared the information openly and trusted most people would keep it confidential.
Jules, that's really an interesting question, and I've never thought about it, because intuitively, when you asked, I was thinking, sure, everyone should sign a non-disclosure. Why not? But then when I think about it, I can't think of one owner that I know that has ever done that.
Wow.
Yeah. I think that, as Jim said, I think it's an element of the trust factor within the company. And if the employer trusts his employees, he might be inclined to share it, or he might not.
Yeah, interesting. Well, good. Thank you for that. All right.
So let's move on to, we have 3 more components, and the next one would be the financial component. So once you've kind of come up with your objectives, you've devised a plan, and you have established your personal goals, it's really important to take a look at, and an objective look at, what your company's worth today. Understanding that likely, depending upon your age, it is not going to be where it needs to be to fund your objectives. But as you're getting further up the age spectrum, you're going to hope that the valuation is getting closer and closer to where it needs to be. But it's important to look at the value, because you have to understand, what's the financial position that our company is in. Can we take on more debt? Can we service more debt, or can we not service more debt? This is a capital intensive industry we're in. So lots of times you can't fathom the idea of taking on more debt. And if you can't, that's going to factor into how you're going to achieve your personal objectives. Also, you have to take a look at your cash flow and your earnings, because one of your objectives might be to retain ownership, but transition out of the daily operations of it. So basically, this is often viewed as a negative word, but it doesn't have to be. You could transition your company into a lifestyle company, in which you can take out the earnings that you need each year, still maintain ownership, but not be running it on a daily basis. But to do that, you have to have the cash flow. So these are the types of things that you have to look at. And I'll just give 2 really quick examples. 2 current clients that Jim and I are working on. One went through the process of selling and decided, you know what, even though I'm in my mid-70s right now, instead of selling, I think I'd still like to have a say in how the company's run. So I'd still like to keep the ownership. So I'm just going to take a big loan and a big distribution and still maintain 100% ownership. And he researched it and met with the banks and concluded actually that he could not service the debt the way he had hoped he could. So he didn't proceed with that option. Another one is a similar situation where the owner originally thought, I'm kind of advancing, so I'm going to come out of the daily operations and turn my company into a lifestyle business. I'm just going to keep taking out my compensation because I think I have the cash flow to support it. Well, when he got into it and met with his management team, he concluded maybe that's not the right idea, so maybe we ought to consider selling right now. So really an important first step is to take a look at the financial situation of your company. Carrie, next slide. And when you take a look at the financial condition of your company, you want to establish what is your business worth today. And this is an important process in how you determine the value of your company today, because you want to be able to look at this very regularly. You can look at it every 6 months. You can look at it every month if you want to. You can look at it yearly, but you want to have the formulas in place. So on an apples-to-apples basis, you can consistently say, this is what my company's worth. And it doesn't always necessarily need to be precise, but it needs to be showing the relative direction. So if you're at one point today and a year from now, you're up 10%, that's a really encouraging sign. But on the other hand, if it's down 10%, you need to know that too, because you might need to go back and revise some of your personal objectives. Some of the methods to look at for evaluation, probably our favorite, because this is what all buyers look at when they're pricing a company, is a multiple of your EBITDA. And again, it's helpful, but you don't necessarily need to have the precise multiple each time, but you want to be somewhat consistent. And another great method evaluation to look at that we always prefer, as silly as it sounds, but it would be the asset approach. And take a look at the net asset value of your company. And essentially what you would do is take a look at your major assets and try to estimate what you think the fair market value would be for those assets, for your building, for your equipment, etc. And add all those together,
Sorry.
out your liabilities, and then put in a factor for the intangibles, which would be a royalty rate on your sales. But that will give you two methods that you can compare. And I'll close the slide just by giving a quick example. We do have a valuation practice at New Direction Partners, and we do valuations all the time for ESOPs. And by the way, that's one of the options that we talked about for succession planning. And ESOPs, just like this, it is critical that you're consistent. So you take the time to develop the right formulas, but then year after year after year, you're consistent and you get a relative trend in valuation.
So I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah.
I just wanted to interject a quick question here, because I don't talk to as many as you do, but in talking to people who are looking to acquire businesses, you often hear them say, they're way overvalued. So what do you see in practice that people are doing that, that causes this?
Well, most times, Carrie, when you find a seller with unrealistic expectations, it's because they haven't gone through this exercise.
Okay.
Instead, they've maybe gone through the first half of the presentation that Jim talked about and said, okay, I want to fund my retirement. And to fund my retirement, I need X million dollars to sell my company. And we all know that's not market value. That's people value of what you would like to have. So that's what we see most often. The people that really take the time to look at their financials, even on a monthly basis, and say, okay, did our value go up or down? They're really pretty finely attuned to what the value is of their company. But also, of course, if you really want to be accurate, you can hire somebody, and doesn't need to be our firm. There are many appraisers out there that will go through an exercise like this and tell you what your business is worth out in the market.
Hey, Peter, we have a question.
Sure.
What are the current ranges of multiples that you're seeing on EBITDA or EBIT?
That's a presentation in and of itself. But in general, in the printing industry, and Jim, you chime in too, I would say the range would be anywhere from a low of 3.5 times to a moderate high of, let's say, 5.5 times. And there are extenuating circumstances that can bring that 5.5 up. if you're depending upon a few variables, the size of your business. If the larger you are, the higher your multiple. Your specialty. If you're in large format POP, if you're in web to print, if you're controlling data, if you have creative services, those all are deserving of premium multiples. If you're in the more mature segments, such as books, inserts, forms, general commercial, those are going to start at the lower end, but again, your size and your growth rates will further increase that multiple. Does that answer the question, Jules?
I believe it does. Thank you very much.
So once you take a look at the valuation, then you want to figure out who do you want to involve in the process. And this is a very important decision-making process because you want to involve the people that you trust most and that people where you really value their opinion. So frequently, as the owner, we will see you involve, of course, key members of your management, oftentimes your spouse and your children. Who we would recommend you not include at this juncture would be professional outsiders, such as attorneys, accountants, or really people that could come into this with their own agenda. And we're not trying to be sinister when we say that, because you do need to involve your attorneys and your accountants later on in the process. But doing it too early in the process, we feel, number one, can be expensive, of course. But number two, it also can just get you overwhelmed in the minutia, because you don't want that to happen at this point. At this point, we're still thinking big picture. What are our objectives and how do we get there? So best not to include the outsiders.
Peter, the only thing I'd add on that is, as it relates to the family members or the children, depending on the family situation, even if the children are not involved in the business, but they might be expecting something or have expectations in the state situation, it's best to include all the children so there's no surprises. If it's a large family, maybe one person's going to have the responsibility for taking care of things after mom or dad are gone. And I think the more you can iron that out and air it out ahead of time, the better off you're going to be.
No question about it. That's a really good point. And in fact, we just recently had a client that went through this very process, and he decided to involve his two children, neither of whom were active in the business, but both of whom he had a lot of respect for their business acumen. And after going through the process, he went into it thinking he was a seller of the business. And after coming out of the process, one of his children developed an interest in the company, and such a strong interest that his daughter is now running the company. And he's completely changed and revised his succession planning because he had involved his children. So I would agree with that completely. However, the next slide is a quick slide, but you don't want to involve too many people, because this is an objective and analysis that you're going to be going through, and too many cooks in the kitchen spoil the broth. So you don't want to involve too many people where you're just, again, going to get bogged down in minutia and disagreement. Carrie, you want to go to the next slide? Once you've gone through these two steps, now it's time to get to perhaps a little bit of a more difficult step, and that's where you need to go through the planning process. And it's a little more difficult because it's going to take time. Typically, we say you need to allow 2 to 5 independent sessions to really do this right with your team that you've decided will be participating with you. And in essence, what you're going to do is you're going to analyze both your company and the people within the company by doing a SWOT analysis. I think we all know what a SWOT is, but strength, weakness, opportunities, and threats, because you want to go through these because you really want to understand what your opportunities are as well as what your threats and issues are. Next slide, Carrie. So in order to really accomplish the owner's objectives, you need to go through the SWOT analysis, and it's a difficult process because you need to trust all of the participants and encourage all of the participants to be completely objective. You want their unvarnished opinion as to the strengths and the weaknesses, etc. Because if you don't have that, the chances of you achieving your objectives goes down. Next slide. So this is just, these next two slides are just examples of what we see as frequently as strengths and weaknesses, and then opportunities and threats. But on the strength side, a great strength that we see a lot in this industry is a great sales effort. Or you could be in a great specialty that's just going to really protect the company going forward, and that's a wonderful position to be in. Weaknesses, on the other hand, could certainly be technology and also financial performance. You don't have good financial reporting within the house, and frankly, you don't have good financial situation, period. Next slide, Carrie. With regards to opportunities, one of the great opportunities that we see in our industry, and we do see it today, is good market or favorable market conditions. If you've been able to achieve some of the strengths that we talked about with the sales effort and the specialty, you might be really pleased with your market conditions. And you might feel that you have really, this might sound trite, but weak competitors, or competitors that are not as far along as you are, and that helps. In terms of threats, of course, a terrorist attack is always a threat. The other threat that we're really seeing more and more, and I believe is impending in not the too distant future, would be an economic downturn. We're now 8 years since our last recession, and admittedly that was a huge recession, but typically recessions happen every 5 years, so we're overdue, and our only hope is that the recovery's been so anemic that we're going to continue bumping along, but you need to factor these into your process when you're considering the chances of success with your succession planning.
Peter, I just heard a researcher from The Economist speak last night, and they're projecting that the next downturn will be about 2019.
Well, that's better than I would fear if I didn't want to be too optimistic, and maybe it's not as good as it could be if we wanted to be optimistic. So that seems reasonable, Carrie. But clearly, the longer we go, the better, and the more of a recovery we see, the better. But again, you want to factor all of these things into your analysis, because you can't just assume the company is going to continue bumping along indefinitely the way it has been. I think we all had a rude awakening back in 2008, 2009, and we know that that's not the case. So when you're doing the SWOT analysis and the planning process, we would recommend you give consideration to bringing an outside facilitator in to help you with that. You don't necessarily have to do that, but as we said earlier, you want everybody to be objective. And when you're having some very frank discussions about the company, the management team, the people within the company, it can get stressful. So we feel a very strong facilitator or leader can have the direct approach, but also be sensitive to the various emotions that are coming out. So we do think it's a good idea to make the expenditure of hiring an outside independent third-party facilitator. And after these multiple planning sessions, he or she will go and compile a written report discussing all the findings. So we think that'll be helpful too. As we've kind of talked about with the SWOT in this whole planning process, is the ultimate objective is to get everything out on the table. And yes, as we said earlier, it's going to be stressful. But time and time again, we see, and frankly, everybody probably sees, that the most successful companies out there and the best run companies can have these very frank, open, candid, even heated dialogues, because that's how you ultimately find common ground. And again, you have to remember the overall objective of these offsite meetings is to formulate a plan in a very relevant, realistic assessment of your business. And this SWOT analysis is going to be the basis of the plan that you develop. So once you're there, once you've defined your objectives, once you've outlined your timing objectives, what you wish to accomplish and within what time frame, once you've developed an understanding of the financial conditions of your business, where you are today and where you need to be in order to achieve your objectives, and once you've identified the core group, the right group of people that you're going to involve in this process, and then also once you've gone through the planning process, now the fun starts. Now you can build your succession plan. And yes, of course, you want it to be in writing because you want to constantly be able to refer to it. And once you have it in writing, you want to be able to turn it into an action plan. And what are the parts that are going to be covered in the plan? Certainly, you're going to want to cover your retirement objectives, the timing of those objectives. What type of money are you going to need in order to achieve those retirement objectives? And how are you going to get there in terms of the money? Are you going to consider selling some of your stock? Or are you going to start bringing in some management and having them develop ownership? Do you need to fill some company positions, some executive positions, once you transition out of the daily operations? We have seen time and time again where an owner wishes to transition his company to more of a lifestyle company. And to do that, they need to bring in a professional president, sometimes a better CFO, maybe sometimes a senior VP of sales. All the functions that you might be doing today that you're not going to be doing going forward. And also, when you take a look at the different parts of the plan, you need to give thought to what will it be like after we go through the transition. So for example, if you're transitioning the daily operations to a child, that child maybe doesn't have the experience that you did in the financial area. So you might need to get, as we said earlier, you might need a more capable CFO or controller. And how are you going to pay these people differently? Do you want to incentivize them for future performance, which is a great way when you have a professional team? We have seen a number of, I'm not quite sure of the exact acronym, but let's call it a long-term incentive plan, where you have management, and if they achieve certain objectives, they can get bonuses, or they could get ownership. They could get a percentage of the proceeds when you ultimately sell the company. You want to be sure all the motivations are as they should be. And then you want to take, and this is really when you're going to involve your financial planner and your attorney and your accountant, but you want to take the time to look at your life insurance. Do you need to have more life insurance? Do you need to have less life insurance? Should the company be having life insurance on the officers with cash surrender value? Or should it maybe be reducing that expense if you're transitioning out of the business? And of course, estate tax planning is critically important because if you do it right and at the right time, you can save dramatically on estate taxes. You can gift some stock to your children, or you could sell it to them or transfer it to them at reduced valuations, because it could be a minority block of stock as opposed to a controlling block. So this is where you need, again, bring in your outside advisors. You're bringing a valuation expert to talk about gift taxing and estate tax planning, your financial planner, your attorney, and your accountant. And in addition, the final parts of the plan could be that you have formal buy-sell agreements in plan. And in the plan, you very formally want to outline what your expectations are for your management team. And they need to be held accountable. One way to hold them accountable, as we talked about on the prior slide, is have a significant portion of their compensation be incentive-based when they achieve their objectives. We have seen time and time again that can be a very, very effective motivator. Buy-sell agreements will give the management team comfort that maybe you're not going to just sell the company without letting them know, or that they have the protection to know that over time they are going to become owners of the business, so they will take a more vested interest in its success. And the bottom line is, as I think Jim said earlier on, everybody is different with what their objectives are, and so too should every plan be different. It has to cover exactly what it needs to cover so you can achieve your objectives. And so there's no right or wrong necessarily in what goes into the plan. Better to have too much than too little. And then what do we like about this method? Well, we like it because when you're done, you have a formal written plan and a formal written business plan that you can follow. And you can develop buy-in from your management team and perhaps your next owners of your company and the next managers that are going to be stepping up. So it develops expectations and it aligns the expectations. But also when you have a formal plan, it provides you the opportunity to go back and always make adjustments to it. You don't want to just write it and put it in your drawer and forget about it. You want to keep it current. You want to review it on a very periodic basis, whether it's every 6 months or every 12 months, every quarter, with the core members of your group to make sure that you still have vetting among the various participants. And with that, that is our presentation. We have time for further questions, and we would love to hear questions or comments of people who have been through an experience like this.
Yes, we would. Please go ahead. There's the Q&A section, also the chat. Please go ahead and list those out. I have one question as far as kind of going back to the lifestyle business, so where you're not necessarily giving up your ownership, but
yes,
your employees to transition. What do you see as some of the pitfalls of that? I can see power struggles potentially. I mean, obviously, if you lay your plan out really well, you feel as though everyone has buy-in. But what are some of the challenges that you've seen in that scenario?
Truthfully, Jules, we've seen more pitfalls than we have situations where it works out flawlessly. It is a very different, very difficult to have a successful lifestyle company. It's just very tricky because if an owner goes from running the company on a daily basis, they're still owning the company but not coming in on a daily basis, do people still call him? It gets, as you said, it gets very political, where people might be calling the owner going around the professional president's back, or they might be going to the professional president, and it can be very complicated. But even more importantly, let's be brutally honest, we all love our industry, but it is a lower margin industry. And when you are trying to compensate a professional president and the owner who is not active in the business, it costs a lot of money, and it can very frequently drain the company to the point that the existing management team and existing employees get, frankly, angry because they think they can't run the company to achieve the objectives that have been set out with them because they don't have the resources to do it. So it could just be a very, very vicious cycle. It is rarely our recommendation, but we have also seen it done successfully.
Okay. You know, I've seen several cases where the owner has transitioned the daily management to family, but they still come in every day. And sometimes that works, and sometimes you hear the kids say, oh, you know, can we move on? Because especially with the pace at which technology is moving, sometimes that can be a barrier to adopting new technology. So how do you recommend addressing that?
Jim, you want to take that one?
Well, that's a challenge, and I guess each situation is different. Depends on the personality of the owner that's coming in. Is he disruptive? I've seen a few success stories like that where the owner's got a friendship with a lot of employees, and he comes in and he maybe has lunch at the office every day with some people, but it's strictly social and he's not interfering with the business. And that seems to work fine. But to Peter's point earlier, if you're coming in and you're meddling and you're doing things behind the back of the people who you've put in charge, that can be very disruptive in a hurry. So again, I think it comes down to personalities, how willing the owner is to let go of responsibility and really let go and delegate effectively.
And by the way, I would also add, in fairness, it's not only difficult for the management team, it can be very difficult for the owner, mm-hmm. who is used to calling all the shots, and then all of a sudden that owner wakes up and feels uncomfortable coming into the company because they don't know if they're going to be able to make a contribution, or they don't know if they're going to be disruptive, as Jim talked about. So it can certainly be difficult, but to Jim's point, and it does seem that, if I were to say a generality, maybe it just takes time to get to that point, but I can think of many circumstances where we've gone in and the son or daughter's running the company, or some family offspring, and they will just speak so happily that their father still comes into the company on a daily basis. But as Jim said, it's really more therapy to that individual, where they're having lunch with people, or not necessarily running the company, but it can be a real positive, but it just seems to take an awful long time to get there.
Now, I know one company where the original owner is in his 80s, and the three sons are running the company, and he started the company as a service bureau back in the days before CTP and all of that, and really led the company through a number of innovative stages. And he acts as the visionary. They run the operation, they make all the decisions, but he's out there sort of as the visionary leader that says, okay, maybe we should look at going here next or there next. And that seems to work very well for them.
I think Jim said it well. It's a case-by-case basis, and it works great for them, and that's wonderful. We've certainly seen circumstances like that too, but for other companies where there are maybe different egos or different personalities, it can be very difficult too.
Can we talk a little bit about ESOPs? If a company is looking down that path, what seems to be the sweet spot for that kind of a direction, as far as maybe size or capabilities or family versus, what do you see that's working, and what do you see that are some of the challenges that people are running up against that they should consider?
So I don't want to be a doomsayer during this presentation, and I apologize if I come across that way, but ESOPs are very challenging in our industry. And the reason for that is, to have a successful ESOP, you need to consistently grow each year. And you don't want to have peaks and valleys. You want to be steady growth, because what you really want to show in an ESOP, you have to have your valuation every year, and you want to show steady growth in the valuation, because as employee owners approach retirement, they want to know what their stock is essentially going to be worth, and they don't want to sell it at $15 a share to see it go up to $50 the next year and then back down to $5 the following year. And that's a challenge, because our industry really isn't very steady, predictable, just with stable growth. Now, there have been some very successful ESOPs within our industry, and as I indicated earlier, we have a valuation practice and we value them, and we've actually sold a couple very successful ESOPs. I would say to be successful, you need to have a critical mass, that you are not going to be susceptible to the fluctuations that some of the smaller printers might be susceptible to. And if you get to that critical mass and you have a very strong balance sheet, and you're going to be able to effectually enable the employees to retire by buying their stock out when they get to retirement age, then it can be successful. And on the positive side, for the sellers, the owners doing an ESOP, you do get tremendous tax benefit, but it's risky, because you're going to be paid out over time and have to take a lot of debt on the company's books.
I have a question on the line. G. Boza, can you hear us?
I think so. Can you hear me?
Yep, we sure can. What's your question?
It seems like we talked a lot about companies that potentially will sell or give their business to a son or daughter or somebody in the family. However, oftentimes, particularly in the printing industry, sons or daughters aren't interested in taking over the business. So therefore, selling to a strategic buyer or an outside investor might be the more appropriate way to do it. What are some of the things that Peter and Jim see that are important from the buyer's eyes, that if a company wants to increase the value of the company over the next year or 18 months so they can get higher value for the company, what are the key things that they should be looking at, that buyers typically look at, that they can improve upon so they can maximize value when they sell?
Great. Thank you for that question.
It's a great question. Jim, do you want to take that, or do you want me to take it?
Sure. It is a great question. And as Peter said earlier about another question, it's almost a presentation in itself. And we can send you a list from another presentation of things that will help increase the value. But certainly some of the things off the top that we talked about earlier. If the company is growing, that will add to the value. If your balance sheet is strong, that will add to the value. If you're paying down debt quickly, that will help increase the value. If your equipment is relatively modern and up to date, that will help increase the value. We could have two companies with the exact same profitability, and if one's got newer equipment, Someone's going to pay more for that because they don't have to quickly invest in new technology, where the other one that's got older equipment, the buyer's going to have to spend a lot on capital equipment. So those are all things that will add to the value. If the buyer is going to be an absentee buyer, if they're not going to be involved in running the day-to-day, they're going to want to look for a management team that's capable of continuing to operate the business. So those are some of the quick things that come to mind, but that list could go on quite a bit longer.
And as Jim said, we'd be happy to talk with you offline about other factors, and we have many slides that we'd be happy to discuss that with you.
Thank you.
Perfect. Thanks for that question. All right. Well, we are at noon, and so again, the last slide has Peter and Jim's contact information. Happy to have you contact them directly. You can contact your PIA affiliate, again, to thank those that were involved, VMA, PIASC, Printing Industries of Georgia, PPI, Printing Industries of New England, and all the PIA affiliates from everyone from around the United States. We thank you for coming. You definitely can get information from them about New Direction Partners. You can contact Peter or Jim directly. We will be sending you out a link to this presentation and the discussion that we've had today. We look forward to your feedback, and hopefully in the future we'll host future conversations with our friends here from New Direction Partners and bring those forward to you as well. Any other last parting words?
Thank you, Jules. Thank you, Carrie.
Our pleasure.
Thanks, guys.
Yes, thank you again for pulling it together. Have a great day, and thanks for joining us. Cheers.
Thank you.